Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my law firm assists physicians with employment contract issues. Today I'm going to talk about the average tail insurance cost for a physician who practices in family medicine. So let's first talk about the different types of malpractice insurance and then get to how much it generally will cost. So first, there are two main types of coverage. Either a claims-made policy or an occurrence-based policy. If it's an occurrence-based policy, the physician does not need tail insurance. What it means is that a policy has to be in effect when the claim occurs or where the incident occurs. And so in that scenario, you don't need tail insurance. Occurrence coverage is usually about a third more expensive than claims-made. And so that's why some employers only use claims-made coverage, just because it's cheaper. A claims-made policy means a policy has to be in effect when the claim is actually made. And so there's a scenario where an employee can terminate the employment agreement, and then there's still going to be a gap in between the last patient they see for that employer and then the last day that the patient could sue them. Most states it's 2 years, although there are exceptions that can go longer than that. So if they need it's a kind of a gap policy that covers that time period, and that's called tail insurance. And so a good rule of thumb is tail insurance is about twice what your annual premium is. So obviously this is state specific. I can't give you an exact amount for every state, but a general rule of thumb is most primary care physicians will pay somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000 a year for their annual premium. And so if tail costs around twice that, then their tail cost would be somewhere between $12,000 to $16,000. Now that's a one-time payment. So it's not that the physician has to pay that amount every single year until the tail period ends. It's a one-time payment and then usually covers the entire gap. Now, the physician could pay either more for a longer tail, less for a shorter tail, but it makes sense. If you're going to pay for tail, you just make certain that you get a policy that covers the entire gap. And if you were to get a 2-year policy, and then it's 2 years from when you either know or should have known about a malpractice incident, and so if the patient couldn't have known before then and then finds out and then sues you after that 2-year period, then you're kind of stuck. So I would suggest getting the longer tail, even though it's a little more expensive. Now, who pays for tail insurance? Kind of depends, where you're employed. If you're employed with a big hospital network, usually most of them, at least nowadays, are self-insured. And so very rarely would they pass the cost of tail insurance or force the physician to pay for tail insurance. If private practice is the kind of, most common setting where a family medicine physician would have to pay for tail insurance. So let's just say it's a small physician-owned practice. They use claims-made insurance, and then in the employment agreement, it's going to state who is responsible to pay for the tail insurance. So in this scenario, let's say the employee is responsible to pay for tail. Then it'll state by the end of the contract, meaning like before the last day that the physician works for the employer, they have to purchase the tail policy and provide proof of that to the employer. Now, a couple ways of getting out of having to pay for it. Well, obviously, if you negotiate before signing the contract that the employer will pay for it, that's one way of getting out of it. 2, for most states, if you stay with the same insurance company, so if you figure out a way, if you move from maybe one private practice to another and they use the same insurance provider, then normally that insurance provider will just roll over your old policy into a new one, and you won't have to pay for tail insurance. Now, if you're going from hospital to hospital, they're almost never going to use the same insurance company, so that just won't be possible. And then the third way is called nose coverage, and that's when your new employer pays your old tail. So like I said before, you can kind of think of it as like a quasi signing bonus. If the tail cost is $16,000 and the new employer will pay your old tail, then it's kind of like a bonus. And in that scenario, It's kind of specialty dependent, like some specialties with very high annual premiums like OBGYNs or maybe some surgeons. That might be a huge negotiating point for a new contract if they're responsible for their tail. But in family medicine, it's a reasonable amount. Not going to break the bank for anybody. Now, certainly it's an amount that you would prefer not to pay for, but it's not some crazy amount that's going to cripple someone financially. Now, I guess the biggest kind of, I don't know if problem's the right word, but if somebody starts an employer and only works for a year and then terminates the agreement, they're responsible for tail. It may be a little less than twice, but still you could work for a company for 1 year and still have to pay, 1.5 to 2 times the annual premium. So if you were, taking short stints with employers and you're responsible for paying tail, you're going to lose a lot of money over time. So kind of take that into account. Or maybe if you have the option of deciding, do I want an occurrence-based policy or a claims-made policy, maybe do the math on, all right, I'm going to pay a third more per year for occurrence, but if you stay with an employer for a longer period of time, maybe it works out that an occurrence policy would make more sense than a claims made. So so that is kind of a little primer on tail insurance costs for a family medicine physician. If you have any questions, you can always call my law firm at the phone number listed below in the description. Or you can always reach us through our website, ChelleLaw.com. I appreciate you watching the video. Thank you.